it's a steal.
No, it is a steal. And I think at this point, at least at this point in the draft, it is a great steal if you're looking for a value pick in the draft. So, I mean, look, the first round has ended.
We've been so focused on defense, though, we've barely had time to talk about any offensive players.
We haven't. And going to the second Raiders pick, which, Riley, I'm going to give you time to obviously look up. Great segue, by the way. Josh Jacobs, the number 24 overall pick.
Big halfback.
Out of Alabama. One of the best running backs in this draft this past season. What potential, Riley, does he bring to the field, and what should the Raiders expect moving forward?
So this is, in my eyes, a replacement for Marshawn Lynch. You know, a guy who, as a Packer fan, annoyed us a lot when he was playing in Seattle. And this guy is kind of in the same mud. Josh Jacobs, he's a big dude. He's going to break some tackles for you at the line of scrimmage. He's going to fight. He's going to fall forward. And, you know, he's going to make an impact. As we said, all these first-round players need to make an impact right away if you're going to take them within the top 25 picks of this draft, which the Raiders have had an extreme luxury of having 3 in this first round. At 24, Josh Jacobs is a good pick. He will be a good running back, but running backs are athletes, and there are athletes deep in this draft. You can get running back depth in the 3rd, in the 4th round, and there are, I would say, better players at 24 for the Raiders to take. They do need a replacement at halfback. I think they reached a little bit here to fill a spot that they needed, that they didn't get to fill in free agency. It's a spot they needed, but maybe the draft wasn't the best round, the way to do it. They were kind of forced to play this hand, I think.
I mean, you look at what's available, by the way, which running backs in the last couple of years, as you've seen, Riley, not just from your own backfield, but just as a whole, have not been drafted and not valued high. Again, particularly when you have an all-star quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, it just doesn't make sense to draft a running back with that high of a pick, especially if you're trying to win the Super Bowl. Of the picks that are still available in the second round, which I think are value picks,
you look about those.
Juwan Taylor, the offensive tackle out of Florida, who was rated at one point the number 10 overall pick in this draft, and is, again, 6'5", 312 pounds out of Florida. One of the best players there available. You have Drew Lock, the quarterback out of Missouri, available as a great second-round pick. You have Greedy Williams, who many predicted to be a great first-round pick from LSU, another defensive star from there. You do have DK Metcalf as the number 12, a best available player, at least according to ESPN.com. Obviously, Riley, I think you're looking at CBS, so it might be a little bit different than me.
I think I have my own ratings on Metcalf.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you're rating him a little bit higher. Julian Love out of Notre Dame. I mean, another cornerback there, 5'11", 195 pounds. A lot of defensive players are still available. And again, look, the first-round picks...
defense-heavy draft class. A lot of defensive players were taken, but there's a lot left. And a lot of value in the second round especially. These big spotlight players were taken in the first round, but these second-round players are not that far below these first-round players in about quality and talent. So this second round is going to get interesting.
It is, because you're going to get first-round value for a second-round pick, and that's pretty great. And so you're basically paying below market value, which, again...
At any time is a good thing for a franchise. That's what they look for.
Right. Exactly, and that's what everyone aims to get, particularly in the second round or the third round, or even the fourth round. I mean, obviously we can go to the sixth round and get Tom Brady, but again, not everyone's going to get the all-time best quarterback in the sixth round. You can draft a little bit higher and still get a top-tier quarterback. But again, it's not just a quarterback here. It's the pieces that you develop around it. Particularly Seattle has been really great at this. You look at other teams at New England. They have drafted, particularly in the second, third, fourth round, they've drafted players where they're not as valuable to other teams, but to them, it fits their scheme. And I think that's the point. It's not always best player available. It's best player available for your scheme. And I think that's what the difference is between teams who advance farther in the playoffs or are consistent every single year, like New England, and other teams that just draft, hey, I'm going to get this star because I think he can put us over the top right now, which if he doesn't, will set your franchise back maybe a year or more, which I think is a big problem in today's NFL. So, Riley, I mean, what other picks do you think, from a Packers perspective anyway, at least, maybe the floor to that, always, I typically don't put a biased perspective on the draft, but again, being that you are a Packers fan, what are some needs that you're looking for in the second, third, fourth round of this draft?
So, Packers went out. We got a kind of defensive end / linebacker in Rashard Gary. We don't really know where he's going to end up playing. But it was a need. We seem to address this need in free agency with the Smiths. We got Zadarius and Preston Smith as both outside linebackers. I think we brought in Rashawn Gary as kind of a backup to these guys, maybe able to learn from these veterans and come in a few years. Again, Savage, I believe, will be able to firm up our secondary. And then moving on from that, those are both defensive picks. And I know a lot of Packers fans are defense, all the way down to the third round. But I think we got to switch a little bit and look at our offensive line. We need a right guard, we need a right tackle, or maybe someone who can play both. And in this draft class, those type of players are falling when defensive players are being taken at a premium. So in this second round, there's going to be a lot of offensive linemen who might be valued at a little bit higher than we'll be able to take them. And wherever these drafts, the picks come out ahead of them, I think the Packers will be able to adapt and react and find a player that fits their scheme on this offensive line. Now,
I'm going to ask you a question that I'm sure you may or not been asked before, Riley, being the Packers fan that you are. You've been a fan since you were born, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, ever since my dad put the green and gold on my head,
Great.
I've been eating cheese and cheering Go Pack Go ever since.
And so that's been a long time. How many drafts have you watched because of that?
Oh, I remember the Aaron Rodgers draft, especially, and not really knowing who this guy was and dealing with the whole Brett Favre retirement or no retirement, and that's when the kind of drama of the draft really kind of hit me. And there's these players who have worked so long and so hard to accomplish these goals, and everyone's trying to fit into a scheme, and everyone's trying to make a team better. And all these players, especially in the first, second, third round, are amazing athletes. And it really, watching those players find their place at a right team, that's where I really kind of fell in love with the draft.
Now, which leads me to my next question. So what has been your favorite player or favorite moment from the NFL draft from a Packers fan perspective?
Oh, man. Honestly, I love a lot of players who we got before I was watching the draft, who I just knew were late-round picks. Players like Greg Jennings, who is just a fan favorite in Green Bay. He has that famous big smile, and he won a Super Bowl, and although there's been a little bit of controversy with some talk back about Aaron Rodgers and how he may or may not be a great leader on the team, Greg Jennings has always been a great, hero of mine as a young athlete. Just seemed like a great guy who got picked late and had something to prove. And I think that's something that Aaron Rodgers also had, and something that was compared to a lot of the Dwayne Haskins reports of a quarterback especially, who fell, who has now something to prove. Now, this is a great story for Haskins and a great opportunity for him to show that he should have been picked fifth. He should have been picked in that top 10. And he has that chip on his shoulder. And we saw, at least in Green Bay, that Aaron Rodgers was able to take that chip on his shoulder and show that he should have been picked ahead of Alex Smith, and show that he was the Super Bowl quarterback that the Packers needed. He was the replacement for Brett Favre, even when people loved Brett Favre and we were never ready to let go of him. This is an opportunity for so many young players to really shape a franchise, to get a fan base behind them, and I think Dwayne Haskins especially has a huge opportunity to do that, and it's very exciting.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously sharing that perspective from a Green Bay Packers perspective, being as tough as it was for a legend and an iconic player to a franchise like Brett Favre, who could be either I would say a top 5 easily Packer of all time. I think that's safe to say. But then a guy like Aaron Rodgers to come in and say, "Hey, look, this is what I can do, and I have the potential to be in some statistical manners better than Favre." I'm sure that was tough for Packers fans to accept, but as the winning came, I think overall the Packers fans was like, "Look, this is our guy. We got to support him. We got to be around this guy." And then to the back end of his career, it's been a little more challenging just because of the injuries and the controversy that has surrounded him as he has taken, I would say, a fair amount of the salary cap space that prohibits most teams from building around that, but he's still a player that you guys drafted, and I think from that draft moment, you guys are going to continue to support him until the day he leaves the franchise, which I think overall is a great respect to what the Packers organization is. You guys are going to support every single player that comes through that organization and says, "Hey, look, we drafted you, we want you, we're going to keep you as the best quarterback or best safety. We love you until you leave, and even then we'll still respect you in some respects, whatever way, shape, or form we can." And I think for Aaron Rodgers, obviously that's where he's put himself, I would say, in the top 10 maybe of Packers lore. And again, you'd have to look through the archives to say where he would fall in. I mean, there's so many discussions where you could have that, and again, that debate would probably be for a separate podcast. Right? Exactly. From a Bills perspective, it's really tough. I mean, for me,
let's talk about the Bills.
I mean, from the Bills' perspective, it's very tough. I mean, you can talk about Lee Evans. Obviously, Riley, you know him out of Wisconsin, one of the best wide receivers coming out of the draft, I think back in 2003, 2004. And the fact that he's not on the roster, obviously, and the fact that he's gone is a little bit tough just because of his potential early on in his career. Injuries played a factor in it, and the fact that he wanted so much money, we said, look, let him go to Baltimore, and he almost got to a Super Bowl, which honestly, from a personal perspective, I wanted him to get to. You have that. Marshawn Lynch was great, as we saw in the first couple of years of his career in Buffalo there, and he wasn't able to continue his career in Buffalo just because he wanted to get a trade to Seattle, which, again, I don't blame him for that. It's just, look, he's a West Coast kid who wants to be happy, and at the end of the day...
That's the reason why I went to Oakland,
And that's one of the reasons why we forget that these players are human beings and they want the perfect job scenario.
They have families around, they want to live near people they've played with, and we forget about them being people, and we almost think about them as chess pieces on the board. You're right.
Right. We think of them as a commodity and saying, "Hey, look, we drafted you. We're going to keep you in this, I would say, sphere until we don't want you or don't need you anymore." And for that respect, it's a little bit challenging for a player saying, "Hey, look, these are the draft rights and these are the rules." But look, players can force their way out. We've seen NBA players do that. We've seen NFL players do that in obviously recent memory.